Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome. Well, welcome to a stately Varatze apartment. I am not set up to film, but I'm filming anyway because this is the last day of September that I'm filming, and I wanted to acknowledge the end of Cimmerian September, a reading event I created last year celebrating Robert E. Howard and his greatest creation, Conan the Barbarian. And it's been very successful this year. It has taken on a life of its own, and that's been very nice. That's very satisfying to see. Robert E. Howard has achieved a new level of popularity, I think, in recent years, and he deserves that, and it's fantastic. This year, I set myself the challenge to read all of the L. Sprague de Camp edited Conan paperbacks that showed up in the late 60s and the early 70s, and that was occasionally a difficult experience. I could sense Robert E. Howard turning in his Texas grave a few times during the reading of those pastiche stories, but it made me appreciate where we are today. We have some great editions of Robert E. Howard's original Conan stories that are available to everyone, and that's great. And I was thinking about Robert E. Howard and where he's kind of led me. He reading the Conan stories actually led me to an interest in ancient history, because I've always been a fan of Conan ever since I was young. And as I got older, I started to wonder about actual ancient history. And I was thinking about that here in Varatze at this apartment, because when I first started traveling Europe in 2007, before I left the United States, I picked up this book, Herodotus, The Histories. And I probably would never have picked up this book if I hadn't had an interest in Robert E. Howard and the Conan stories. And I picked up this book before I traveled Europe in 2007, and I loved it. This was not what I expected, and this has become my favorite book of all time. And when I traveled Europe the first time and I got here to Varatze, I had finished this book, and I left it here in a closet in this apartment because I had bought a bunch of other stuff and I didn't want to carry all that stuff back to America with me in my one suitcase. So I left it here and figured I'd just buy another copy when I got home, and I ended up buying several. But this is just a cheap Barnes & Noble edition of Herodotus, the first Western historian, and full of wonderful stories. And it also talks about the Cimmerians, the actual real-life Cimmerians, make an appearance in this book, which is interesting, you know, if you're into Conan. Very different Cimmerians from our favorite Cimmerian, Conan. And it's just magnificent, and it's become my favorite book of all time. So when I got back here this time, I dug it out of the closet. And this one is translated by C.C. Macaulay. It's a decent translation. This edition is not the best. You know, it's got maps kind of stuck in the middle here and there where they're hard to find. And what you really need is you need a good set of maps when you're reading Herodotus. But there are some really great editions of Herodotus out there nowadays. But it just made me think, you know, I never would have picked this book up probably if I hadn't already been a fan of Conan and Robert E. Howard. You know, it's funny where interests will take you. And Robert E. Howard is, you know, he's still, I think, underappreciated. Such a great writer. He is a pulp writer, very much a pulp writer, or he was the greatest pulp writer of all time. And I think that because of that, he's not taken as seriously as he should, because he also took his work very, very seriously. And I think that's what made him excel. That and his very dark worldview, unfortunately, and his own peculiar interests and his intelligence. He was just a remarkable writer. And it's satisfying to me that so many people are so interested in Robert E. Howard nowadays, to the point where, an event like this has gained real ground. And so Cimmerian September, a great success, and it will return next year unless something happens to YouTube. It will return next year. Next year we're going to be focusing on the predecessors of Conan, King Kull, Solomon Kane, and Bran Mak Morn. And so that should be fun. And of course, as long as YouTube exists, Cimmerian September will exist, I'm hoping. And that's all I have to say. Okay, guys, I probably won't see you until I get back to the United States in a few days, next week, sometime, and I will give a belated reading report. Okay, catch you later.